Oh god. Hi guys, welcome back. My name's Claire and today I thought I would tell you all about what I read in January. This month I managed to get to 11 books, which I was really pleased about. This is probably one of the best reading years I've had since I think it's February 2022. And I was really pleased with what I read. I read a good amount of pages, so I'm going to go into the stats first. Of the 11 books I read this month, 5 of them were physical books that I hadn't read off of my TBR already, 4 were audiobooks and 2 were ebooks. Splitting these into genres, I read 5 romances, 5 fantasy or fantasy romances and 1 horror, and I managed to read 5,151 pages this month. I kicked off my year with Reckless by Elsie Silver. I think Elsie Silver is possibly becoming one of my favourite authors very, very quickly. This book follows Theo and Winter. You meet these characters briefly in the previous books, but Theo is a very confident, sure of himself bull rider, and Winter is quite an icy character who right at the start of this book is going through a divorce. They both meet when they end up at a family dinner at Chestnut Springs, and after the dinner, which doesn't really go the best for Winter, she goes to a bar, meets Theo, and one thing leads to another. Winter then finds out that she's pregnant and the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to give anything else away. I loved this. I really loved Theo. He's just such a good guy, and I feel like you don't get genuinely good characters quite a lot in books. I really enjoyed the surprise baby trope actually. Not something that I expected to have enjoyed as much as I did, but I would be interested in picking up more books with this trope after reading this. You really warm up to Winter by the end of this book and you end up really, really enjoying her, and I would say that this is probably my second favourite book in the series. Well, I'd maybe say joint second favourite, but we'll get into that. But that goes without saying, I gave this a 5-star. So after that I went on to pick up Throne of the Fallen by Kerri Maniscalco. I wasn't sure about picking this up initially. I read the Kingdom of the Wicked series and I didn't really love the third book in that series. So initially I wasn't going to read this, but then Kayla from Books and Lala read it and really enjoyed it, and I really trust her recommendations. So I picked it up off the back of that and I was pleasantly surprised. This one follows Camilla and Envy, and I really don't want to say too much about it because I went into this blind and I had a great time reading this. It was a super fast read. I really liked Camilla as a character. She's very take no shit, which I love. Characters cover quite a lot of ground in this book, and I think it was interesting to get to see more of the kind of hell world that you don't get to see an awful lot in the Kingdom of the Wicked series. In my opinion, there was just a few bits on this that missed the mark, so I've given it a 4.5. But I think the next book in this series is out in September and I will definitely be picking it up, and I really hope it's as good as this one is, if not better. After Throne of the Fallen, I ended up beta reading a book for one of my friends. This hasn't been announced yet. It should be announced within the next couple of months I think, but I can't talk any more about that. But I did give that a 5 stars and I'm really excited to be able to talk about it once it's announced. Next up is a book that I actually started last year and I never got around to finishing it, but I was determined to finish it this month, and it's Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. I listened to this on audio and I don't know if that was maybe where I kind of fell down on it. I didn't love the narrator so much, but I picked it up because I really enjoyed Delilah Green, and this just didn't quite hit the same mark that that one did. This follows Astrid, who following the breakdown of her engagement, she ends up finding herself involved in a renovation project where she meets Jordan, and there's a bit of a rivalry that ensues between them. It is a romance, so you can probably guess what happens. I definitely think this could have been better. I didn't really love the relationship very much between Astrid and Jordan. I think it kind of fell a bit flat. I didn't really see a lot of chemistry between them. I enjoyed getting to see Astrid and her growth as a character, but I feel like we didn't get as much of that as what we could have. So I had a good time, but it wasn't the best, and I gave it a 3. The next 3 books I'm not going to talk about overly much, just because for me they were rereads in anticipation of my most anticipated book of the year. I've been waiting for this book for 2 years, and you'll just need to find out next month how I got on with that. But I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas from the ACOTAR series, and then I also picked up House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath both by Sarah J Maas. These are all really hefty books, but they're so worth the read. They're all 5 stars for me, to be honest. This is really good urban adult fantasy. The first 100 pages or so, I know everyone says it, it's very info dumpy and it's so worth getting through. I am completely obsessed with this book. I've read this book 3 times now, and then this was my second read of House of Sky and Breath. I didn't enjoy this 2 years ago really when it came out. I enjoyed the characters and being back in this world, and it's Sarah J Maas, so really a lot of her writing gets 5 stars for me. But this is really politics heavy, and you could tell this was setting up for the big thing that's going to end up happening in the next book, and I think it put me off, whereas this time I read it on audio and I really enjoy it. I really highly recommend the audiobooks of these. They're narrated by Elizabeth Evans and I think she's great. So yeah, I managed to get through this just in time for the release of House of Flame and Shadow. So the next book I read I was really disappointed by, and that was Midnight Ruin by Katie Robert. This, I think it's time for me to say goodbye to the Dark Olympus series, and I'm incredibly sad about it. I might just put a hold on reading the next couple of books, but this one just did not hit the mark at all, which is really sad for me because the first 2 books in that series were like my favourite books of the year when they came out. But this followed Karen, Eurydice and Orpheus, and it just gave me nothing. I was so incredibly bored reading this book. I feel like there's a main plot that kind of takes place across all of the books, and I feel like we don't see enough of that, and then we don't end up seeing enough of the relationship, that I feel like neither can be done justice. I think if there were going to be slightly longer and we did get a bit more about the politics in the world in Olympus and then more between the characters, I think it could have been really, really good, but unfortunately it fell short and I gave it a 1. After having such a disastrous read, I decided to go back to one of my favourite authors, which was Elsie Silver, and I read Hopeless. This is the last book in the Chestnut Springs series and I loved this. This is a book I would say is probably on par with Reckless. This follows Beau, who is ex-military, and Bailey, who is a local bartender, and there's a bit of an age gap. I think he's 35 and she's 22, and I love this. There's a fake engagement trope in this, again one of my all-time favourite tropes, and I could not put this down. I think I read this in about 5 hours. It's not overly long, it's about 300 pages or so, but it's so worth the read. Absolutely recommend this. Following on from that, I've picked up Chase Me by Tessa Bailey. This is one of her series which has just started to get new covers. This came out in 2013 and I think the covers before were actual people, whereas I quite like these cartoony covers. I think if you asked me a year or 2 ago I would have said I hated them, but I really like them. I think like they match the aesthetic of the rest of her books, so I quite like that. This follows Roxy, who is an aspiring actress, but she is currently working as a singing telegrammist to try and make some money, and she turns up in a bunny costume to this man's house to sing him a song. And the man in question, Louis, or Lewis, the audiobook narrator pronounced it Lewis, but I'm pretty sure it's Louis. Lewis is the one who answers the door on the other side, and it turns out the telegram is from his one night stand. And he kind of gets a little bit obsessed by Roxy, not in a creepy stalkery way, but as in he wants to know who she is so that he can ask her out to go on another date. They do kiss in the doorway, so it's not like this just came out of nowhere. But a lot of this book is Lewis, or Louis, however we're pronouncing it, trying to win over Roxy and establish a relationship between them. It was fun. I quite liked the singing telegram part of it. There was a whole lot of mishaps. Roxy just seems to be one of the most unluckiest characters that I think I've read in a while. But it's fun. I gave it a 3 and it's definitely worth picking up. It's only 250 pages, so if you're looking for a short read for February, definitely get this. Last up is the only horror that I read this month, and that is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This was weird. Weird is the only way I can really describe this. I've only ever read fantasy by this author. I've read one fantasy book by them before and I did enjoy it, and I was advised at the time not to judge T. Kingfisher's horror on this book because they do have better horrors apparently. But this follows Alex Easton, who's a retired soldier, and he finds out that his childhood friend Madeline is dying and rushes back to the Usher estate, Madeline's estate, to go and see her before she dies. And it just, there's weird things that's going on when he gets there. Madeline's sleepwalking and talking about weird things, and there's an awful lot of mushrooms on the estate, which is quite a big talking point in it. It's literally the first chapter is talking about mushrooms. I found this to be interesting. I've never read The Fall of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe or seen the Netflix show or anything, so I don't know how it compares to that. I think I enjoyed this though. I'm gonna say I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4. It's like a 3.5 to a 4. I'm not quite too sure where my ranking lies on it. Will I pick up more of their books? Yes, I will. I do have a couple on my TBR already, but I would not say that this is the finest book, but it was really interesting. So that is everything that I read in January. I would say this is a pretty solid reading month. I'm gonna have to put this down because it weighs a ton. It was a pretty solid reading month. I feel like quite a lot of my books were 4 and 5 stars. I think my average was probably about a 4.5, which, you know, you can't complain. Granted, a lot of this month was rereading favourite books that I've already read before, but I'm really pleased with how much I managed to get done, especially the amount of pages that I managed to get read. So I have high hopes for February that I can continue with this reading mojo that I seem to have found again. But let me know what your favourite book was in January, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye!